excited to begin a series on worship, on praise, on adoration to God, both with words and also through the things that we do, the things that we say, the places we go. Every little thing that you have in your life could become an area or a thing that you can give to God in worship. You may not want to do that. Why would you do that? What would be the purpose of that? Well, we're going to explore that, but I wanted to start by saying that worship is something that doesn't come particularly easy for us, does it? If you want to compliment somebody, you might say to them, that's not bad. That's not bad. By which you mean you actually did really good, but that's a little bit of an understatement, isn't it? We struggle with really lauding somebody for what they've done unashamedly. We kind of keep down a bit, don't want to build them up too much. It might go to their heads or whatnot. We struggle with that. And we struggle with doing that with God. But worship is actually an integral part of being a mature Christian. So turn with me, if you will, to Revelation chapter 4. At least I hope that's where it is. I didn't double check to make sure this was correct. That's at the end of the Bible, Revelation chapter 4. So if you reach the concordance, you've gone too far. And what we're going to be looking at really briefly is we're going to be looking at, we have a glimpse of how things are in heaven. What sort of things take place? What are people doing? And let's go ahead and start in verse 9. So we have a snapshot of heaven, and this is what it says. Whenever the living creatures give glory, honor, and thanks to him who sits on the throne, who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders fall down before him who sits on the throne and worship him who lives forever and ever. They lay their crowns before the throne and they say, "You are worthy, O our Lord and God, to receive glory, honor, and power. You created all these, and by your will they were created and have their being." So we pull back the screen of heaven, and what is it that we see? We see a world that is constantly in worship. They're constantly in worship, and there's different creatures here. Okay, some of them are human, some of them are not human. We're not told why they're there, what their story is. They probably have a pretty cool story. We don't know anything about it. But there they are in the throne room of heaven, humans, other creatures, everyone, and it all is a chorus of worship that's going on constantly. And there's 24 elders, and they consistently fall down before the throne of God and cry out, "Worthy, worthy, worthy is the Lamb." And I don't want you to think that that's just routine. And I don't want you to think that that's just liturgy, where that's what we're supposed to do. Or it's even like what we do when we see the Queen. We kind of curtsy. Well, some of the women do, right? They curtsy when they see the Queen. That's not just a ritual. What's happening is they're examining, as they're looking and they're beholding God. It wells up inside them until they can't contain it anymore, and they find themselves on the floor crying out, "Holy." Like a kettle that you turn on and it heats and it heats and it heats and heats, and then what happens? It boils. And out of them flows worship. Now, isn't that a far cry from anything that you and I do during the week? It's so hard even to say of God that he is good. In front of people who aren't Christians, that is. Right? It's so hard. And we're worried about it, right? In fact, there's a book called God is Not Good, and the purpose is to keep people like us quiet and thinking that we're in the wrong place. Worship. It's something that's missing and neglected from our life. Let's change that, okay? So that was my introduction to this sermon series. And with that in mind, let's go ahead and, if you haven't already, turn to Psalms 93. And by way of introduction, I want to ask the question, how is it that we respond to what we cannot control? So toss out to me some ideas about how you respond to things that are out of your control. Do you have a response? What do you do? What do you guys think?
Sorry.
What'd you say?
Worry.
Worry. Okay, who worries when they don't have control of something? I do that. Okay, what other sort of responses are there? There's more than one, right? Is anybody turned into like micromanager freak? You know, like I I can control this. They come up with their lists and they make sure everything is taken care of, and it's brilliant, the list that they've made, every little thing they've taken care of, and then yet somehow it still doesn't work out. What else? What other things do they do? Do you guys know what I do when I...
Avoid. I avoid.
Okay, avoid. That's a really good thing.
Steer away from that area.
I don't have control of that, so I'm going to do nothing there.
I'm going away.
I won't even try to do the hard thing because it's out of my control. I just give up, right? That's what I did, and like that, actually, I just said, I don't care. So very typically when I run into a situation that's beyond my control, my response is, who cares? Which absolutely drives all of the people who are like, control it, out of their minds, angry with me, okay? That's what happens, is they get so frustrated that I would be like, I'm checking out. And they would say, no, this is the moment to hold on. We're going to lose control of this thing. I mention this because there's a whole line of psychology that does nothing but deal with how people relate to what is out of their control. So what is out of your control? Everything. You can't even decide that you're going to continue to exist for a second. You're all still here. That's great. But our very lives are not controlled by anything that we have. If we live because something else is doing the thing to sustain us. And those circumstances can go wildly out of control. And you've seen them, these tragic moments where people don't make it as well. And it was a huge surprise. Our lives are not in control, and it is very bothersome. The Bible describes us as vapors that appear for a short time, like when it's cold outside and you get that nice mist, but then the sun comes out and the mist just kind of blasts it away. But now, that may be something that causes us great fear, but I think it has a secondary purpose. And that secondary purpose is to drive us to look at and to admire and to awe the one that will never lose control of anything. And that is God, right? He has control. He reigns. He reigns. And so it could drive us, these things that we cannot control, to lose hope, or it could drive us to cause to be micromanagers or to worry and to have heart problems and all sorts of things because of that. Or it could drive us to say there is someone who has completely control, who reigns completely. His name is God, and I am astounded by him. And so that's actually our big message this morning. God really reigns. God really controls it all in a way that is shocking. God is completely in control. And so we look at him, we take him in, and we worship him. He is worthy. He is holding our lives. So let's consider firstly how God has always reigned. God has always reigned. Let's read verses 1 and 2 here. The Lord reigns. He's robed in majesty. The Lord is robed in majesty. He's armed with strength. Indeed, the world is established. It cannot be moved. So God has been the boss since forever. No one can remember a time where he wasn't in charge of everything. Some of you have had the privilege to work at large organizations. And in large organizations, there's usually a couple boardrooms, big rooms where big decisions are made. Now, in America, I'm not sure what it's like here, but in America, in that boardroom, there is a picture. And the picture is of the boss. With their name right there. He's looking down at the boardroom. And he's saying, what sort of decisions are you going to make with my company? Because I'm watching, right? You'd better know. I own this place. I rule this place. This is my world. This is the way that God looks at the universe. It's not a collection of random accidents. It's not like God set the whole thing up and then he's like, I'm going on vacation. That was a lot of work. He is not just the boss of this place for as long as anybody can remember. He's actually a micromanager. And what I mean by that is he has his hands in every little thing that takes place. There isn't a thing that happens in life that God doesn't have to sign off on. That doesn't mean he likes everything. Don't get me wrong. But God has signed off on every second that is ticking in your life. That's the sort of management that he does. He's totally in control. He reigns. But now consider this idea, right? It's not just that he's the boss and that he controls every single second. We all know people who look at that, who say God is in control, and I don't like it. And then they say, well, I don't believe in God. But you're like, you're kind of just angry at them, aren't you? You kind of know that they do believe in God, but now they're angry at him because of the way that they think God has managed the world. But what the author does here is he describes this boss. He says, you're robed in majesty. And then to repeat it, in majesty, you're robed. Girded in strength. This word majesty is not the sort of word that we would use to describe, Bill Gates or Warren Buffett or Jeff Bezos, these incredible businessmen. We don't look at them and say, oh, you're majestic. It's the sort of word that you describe. And I was thinking about this, like, when I got married, I'm sitting in the chapel, right? My wife has not yet entered, right? And my back is turned to everybody, and then people start walking in, and the anticipation is building, and then you're supposed to turn around when your bride-to-be comes in. I turn around, and the most amazing thing happened. I look at my wife, and she is the most beautiful thing that I've ever seen. It's astounding. She's like glowing in white, coming down the path, and I'm just out of my mind, blown away by the beauty, by her majesty. And I'm not alone on this, by the way. If you go online, you can look up and see that there's this weird thing that happens when people are at their weddings and the bride is seen by the groom for the first time. And most of the time they look around and they go, oh, and they have caught this on camera, these moments, and it's wild and it's beautiful and it's amazing. And that sort of majesty is what God wants you to feel about him. He's majestic. It's not just that he's in charge. It's gone from your head to a place where you're taking him in. You're amazed at who he is. You're astounded at his character. Are you astounded by God? Are you? God wants us to be captivated by himself. Listen to David's words. As the deer pants for the water, my soul longs for you, O God. You don't pant for an amazing boss, okay? This is different. One thing I ask, that I will seek, I will dwell in your house, O Lord, to behold your beauty, to marvel at your temple. These are the words of love. David is speaking the language of love, and his language is worship. Shall it be our language as well? Now, it says here that God has established man. We might ask the question, why would I praise God? What has God done for me? And what our text tells us here is that he established the world. But that word world actually talks about established. He's established mankind's dwelling place. He's established mankind's domain. I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but there is a bewildering amount of things that God has done to sustain us. And it's not simple at all. Okay, so you have land, you need resources, you need light, you need heat, you need water, you need all sorts of nutrients, you need proteins, you need to have all of these things right next to you if you're going to live. And what God has done is he's designed this beautiful circular system. We learn all about it. We never stopped and thought about it. You've got like the ocean makes fresh water. You've got these plants that pop up and they give you the food that you need. You get the air. They're making air for you. I don't know if you knew this, right? They're doing all of these wild things. They're very complex. God has established all that and it stands firm. And it's all for you. And then you look inside of yourself and you see something even more amazing. What are you? You are 100 trillion cells all working together to keep this thing we call our body alive. Now, the bigger the company you have, the harder they are to rule. This is 100 trillion cells all working to sustain you. God has established the world of man. It is firm. It cannot be shaken. Now imagine if you were to hear about that tremendous gift that you were like, I'm not going to praise the giver. I'm not going to That's robbery. We're to look at all that God has done for us. Your very life is sustained by God. He's planned it all before you ever came to be. It's like this tremendous gift, and yet the vast majority of us look at all that and say, God, could you take care of my other 3 things, and then we'll talk. God, I don't even believe in you. I'm going to do what I want. And he's given us all this. During Christmas, hopefully everyone here has exchanged some gifts, right? And we usually pay money for the gifts, and they pay money for the gifts, and usually we spend about the same money that we get, and so it all works out. But we still say, thank you, right? Thank you for the gift, although some of us are really picky, and we open the gift, and we don't like it, and we can't hide that we didn't like it. Okay? We still say thank you, hopefully. I mean, what is that about? But anyway, you've been given life. You've been given 100,000 things you do not understand, all to sustain you. And God wants you to look at him and to think, I serve a reigning, powerful, beautiful God who has been God forever. And that's why I exist. And he's good. And I worship him. And I worship him. And I love him. That's what God is aiming for us. That's point 1. God has reigned, and we should praise. The next 2 points aren't as long, just so you know. And we should praise. The second point is God is overcoming right now. He's overcoming right now. And we read this in verse 3. The seas have lifted up, O Lord. The seas have lifted up their voice. The seas have lifted up their pounding waves. Mightier than the thunder of the great waters, mightier than the breakers of the sea. The Lord on high is mighty. Waves are a great picture of something that we have no control over whatsoever. There's something called a rogue wave. A rogue wave is this wave that we don't understand why it comes about, but it's huge and it destroys things, and if it's around, it's really dangerous. Rogue waves come in, they sweep people out to sea all the time. They're not expecting a wave to come in and hit them, and it does, and it drags them out to sea. There are things called typhoons, hurricanes, tidal waves. They all come out of the sea. We have no idea how to fix them. We can't fix them. They're out of man's control. The sea is a frightening place. We live on this very solid, firm place, and sometimes we dare to get into a boat and go onto the watery place, but it is a dangerous situation quickly. I remember I grew up in California, and I used to love going kayaking. And so one day I was out in Santa Monica, and I got on my kayak with a friend, and we went about a mile out. That was typical of us. We went about a mile out to just enjoy kayaking out on the middle of this ocean. And it wasn't like a huge storm came or anything. It just started to get kind of windy. And all of a sudden, these like nice little happy little waves were just everywhere, and it was frightening. The boat would seem to fly up one every couple of seconds. You know, it was just, I would just be at the bottom, and then I'd be at the top, and I'm like, if any of these waves knocks us over instead of just naturally makes us go up, I'm going to get buried under about 40 feet of water. And we were absolutely, utterly terrified. And it's a great picture of how we feel about life, isn't it? We're scared of so many things. We're scared of so many things that are beyond our control. We obsess about them. We think about them all the time. We try to mitigate their circumstances. We put money into a bank account. We do all sorts of things to make sure that those things that are scary to us seem less scary. But God is mightier than them. God is bigger than them. God drowns out the sound of them. They're not even heard above the greatness of God's glory. It's like God is like a little kid who's wearing the wellies and just kind of kicks a puddle. It's nothing to him. He's huge. We have nothing to be afraid of. I'll give you a second picture that comes from this. Waves of the sea in the book of Psalms are often a picture for everything that opposes God. Every evil thing that screams against God, that says, no, God, your will is not going to be done. No, God, you can't rule over us. It just makes its noise. It foams away. It roars. It's all like basically trash talking and saying, you're nobody, God. I'm the real thing. And you know what? Interesting thing that happens here. Number one, God doesn't just make it so that the waves don't exist. He allows people to say to him, We won't serve you, God. We're better than you, God. You can't tell us what to do. Or, you don't even exist. Ha ha ha. God allows that. God allows wicked people to do wicked things. God allows wickedness to hurt people in ways that are profoundly disturbing. God allows the waves of the sea to roar. But he's also putting it away. Slowly but surely, he's going to show himself mightier than these. So, if you are in a horrendous place this morning because life has gone terribly hard, because horrible things have happened, because people have been horrible, because the effects of sin are just devastating, God is going to turn all of that away. He's going to make it as if it never happened. How do I know that? Did I just make that up? Well, in the throne room of God, there's a sea. In Revelations, there's a sea in the throne room of God. And it's described. And you know what it says? It says it's like glass. Because glass doesn't move. God has completely calmed everything that opposed him. And it stands as a testimony that he's all going to put it away and that we can trust him. He is overcoming right now. And we're in the point where the waves are going back and forth. But we've got this promise that for those who trust him, God will take care of them. Last point. God has reigned. He's overcoming right now. Lastly, his ways never fail. Let's read verse 5. Your statutes, Lord, stand firm. Holiness adorns your house for endless days. So, one thing that people like to say is the only thing that is constant is, who knows? The only thing that is constant is change. Of course, that sounds like a great book. I think I'll sell lots of those, okay? Right? And it's this idea that everything is always changing. And there's truth to this, actually. If you go and read a book from 300 years ago, you'll find, depending on which book it is, you'll find a lot of really good things in it. But you'll also have moments where the authors will just look incredibly silly. And like, oh, we've moved on from that sort of thinking, sir. Like even my illustrations, just give it a couple of years, and we're looking at the same illustration going, that doesn't work anymore. Things grow old. Things stop working. They stop being useful. But God is different, you see. His message is different. God has given us a book, and actually it's 2000. The last time someone wrote in this book, to us, is a little less than 2,000 years ago. A long time ago. And yet God hasn't changed it. God has said that's exactly what you need. His statutes stand firm. They will never change. They'll always be useful. They'll always totally transform your life. They'll always take you the direction you're supposed to go. They are the one sure foundation for you. Where do I go? What do I do? How do I live? It's all in the book. Take it in. His statutes stand firm. People get saved the exact same way they got saved in the first century. It's the exact same sort of thing. God, I'm desperate. I need your help. I'm a sinner. Please help me. Jesus has been provided for you. Have faith. It hasn't changed. It will never change because it flows out of God's character. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. And yet, what happens with us, right? We throw another self-help book up and then 10 years go by and we need another one that's a little different this time because things are getting different. This is the one thing, the sure foundation of our life, the things that God has said. And we can trust in them. And that is gold. And the way that it's described reminds us that we're worshiping, not just talking about God. Your glory adorns your house. So I can say, in America you have the gigantic houses, but they're not nearly as nice. In any sense. You go into the houses here and people have taken extreme care to see all the things that are nice and they just made things beautiful and wonderful. They've adorned the house with beauty. That's God's house. Adorned. The truth of God is like a building that is beautifully adorned, and you want to go to that house. And you want to know who that person is. And you want fall in love with that person. Worship. So that's our message. God really reigns. He's really in control. This isn't a bad thing. It's a very good thing. We're looking at him. We're looking at him as the one who has written every page of our lives and is worthy to write it. We're looking at him, the one who was and the one who is and the one who will be, the God of the entire universe. And he wants you to look at him and to be amazed, to dare to love him, to surrender yourself to him, to worship. And so Jesus is asking, will you worship me? Because I control it all. What would it look like to say yes? The first thing I have down here is worship and prayer. So when I pray, generally speaking, what I do is I lift off the 5 situations that are bothering me the most. Immediately, hi God, help me with this, help me with this, help me with this, help me with this. And if you do it, I will feel better towards you. The end. Here's a better way to start. God, you are awesome. Your will be done. Your kingdom come. Help me to make you honored in my life. Help me to fall in love with you. I have some things, God. Here's my list. Help me to forgive others. Right? This sounds like what? What am I quoting here? The Lord's Prayer. God first. Worship him. You would not approach a friend of yours with whom you have some sort of issue and begin the conversation by saying, listen, it's so good to see you, but I've got a list of things that really bothered me the last time I saw you, and I'm going to tell you what they are. And then at the end be like, but you're still a good friend of mine if you do these things. Okay? But we do that with God. And God is the creator of everything. Start with worship. That's a good principle for your entire life, not just when you pray. Start with worship. What are you going through? Start with worship. What is your fear? Start with worship. The second idea is let's let our worship actually be something that we do something about in our lives. Let's think about this. People don't believe in God for many reasons, okay? But one of the reasons they don't believe in God is because the people that worship God, quote unquote, aren't that excited about him. They never ever speak about him. How cool could he be? They never say God is good. Oh, that doesn't sound right. God has been good to me. God has been there for me. They're afraid of what their friends will think because, so for someone who's not a believer, they look at that and say, man, that is no God I want to serve. If you're not interested in them, why would I ever be interested in them? How do you stop that from happening? You live a life of worship. You let yourself speak about Christ in glowing terms. Let those words come out of your mouth. Let people hear that you're excited about what Jesus has done for you. You can even say things like, praise the Lord, every once in a while. Don't worry. Worship. Last thing about when we sing, okay? The last point is about when we sing, okay? So everybody has all sorts of thoughts about how to do worship. I have a set of things. Other people have another set of things. We all have something, More hymns, less hymns. More new ones, less new ones. More speed, less speed. Bring the electric guitar. Never bring the electric guitar. Bring the different instruments, right? We could do all of these things. We could look at all sorts of different liturgy. We could say, let's just do the Psalms. We could do all these things, and none of these are important or as important as you taking a moment with God to say to him, you are mighty. I love you. That's what worship is really about. We're giving you words, we're giving you thoughts, but those things are supposed to drive you to the throne of God. Not to the throne of self, where you wonder, how do I look? Or am I standing in a weird way? Or do I have my hand up this high or not that high? Okay, whatever it is, lose yourself inside of God. I was thinking, I've sung sometimes and I've sung wrong notes, and some of the congregations notice this, okay? They've noticed that I've been off key. And I want to sing better, really I do, if I sing off key. But I don't care. I want to worship. The only importance that you have during worship for me is I want you to worship too. I want you to experience God. Will you do that when you worship? Will you not worry about what other people are thinking? Will you not want it exactly the way you want it, but you will say, I want to interact with God. I want to pray, and what I was thinking about praying for this end of message, I really want you guys to say something to God about how great he is to himself. Not to me out loud. To him. You appreciate him. He's done great things for you. It's like writing a love letter, but to God. Tell him. Thank him. And then, well, that's it. Give yourself to him. And then we'll close. So I'll give you a moment to do that as I pray. Let's bow our heads.